Good evening once again. Welcome to our new episode of It's Interesting to Know. Tonight we're going to be discussing a new topic. It's called Tithes and Offerings. Tithes and offerings are collected by our churches on a regular basis, and it's just right for us to know the principles behind it, the history behind it, and what God really has to say in His own words in the Bible. This sharing that I have for you is not actually to belittle or to distort this practice, but in fact, by giving you the right perspective and information, my expectation is that our brethren who would understand fully about this matter will be encouraged of giving more and be faithful in their giving to the Lord. Now, years ago, I was hearing a teacher who taught that the teaching of tithe started from the Garden of Eden. He said God commanded Adam and Eve to eat all the fruits as a product of all the trees in the garden, except for the fruit that comes from the tree in the middle of the garden who knows evil and good, because it doesn't belong to them, it belongs to God. So when you eat from there, it equates to stealing. And he actually put this as a parallel in the teaching of Malachi chapter 3 verse 10. See, we are indicted by God that we are stealing from Him because we are actually not giving tithes and offerings and tithes. Now, in the story in Genesis, I don't think that it is about tithes. It's about love that God wants to be tested. He created Adam and Eve on the basis of love. The only expectation that He had is that for Adam and Eve and all of mankind will later on worship Him and love Him back. And that love, of course, has to be tested if it's genuine. And that is the reason that He gave that rule, that law, that do not eat, because by obeying that law, that would indicate that they love God, right? But of course, they failed the test, no? Now, another story that I heard basically is one person was teaching that the idea of tithes was started from Genesis 4:4 during the time of Abel and Cain. Abel and Cain were brothers or sons of Adam and Eve, and at a appointed time they were offering to God. Cain's offering was rejected by God because it is coming from the grains, and the offering of Abel was accepted by God because it is in accordance to His will. And why is it according to His will? Because according to Hebrews 9:22, without shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. Now again, it is not a teaching of tithes and offerings over there. It's a teaching of atonement for the sins. In order for one to atone his sin, he has to actually shed blood. So that's what the lesson that we learn from there. Now, the idea of tithes actually started from the time of Abraham. During the time of Abraham, Lot was, his nephew was in the middle of war between Sodom and other contending kingdoms. And if Lot is not going to get out of the country, he will probably die, 99%. Now, that is the reason Abraham went there together with his 319 trained soldiers from his household, and they defeated the enemies of Sodom. In fact, Sodom's king was so glad he decided to give reward to Abraham, which Abraham rejected. He said, I don't have anything to do. You are a heathen. You don't worship the same God as we worship. I don't like to let the people see that I became rich because of you. And but during the time, there was also one person who came to Abraham, and that person has got no genealogy. There's no information about him, except that Abraham knows that he came from the area called Salem, which we call as Jerusalem nowadays. Now, being a prophet, Abraham has got he knew deep inside his heart and mind, he discerned that that person is holy, and that is therefore that he's planning to actually seek for his blessing. So therefore he came to him and he offered him tenth of everything. That is the idea of the tenth now. He gave everything, tenth of everything to him, and that person who is called in the Bible as Melchizedek blessed Abraham. So that was the first time. But take note that Abraham did it only for once. He didn't do it for a regular basis like weekly or monthly or something. Now, of course, Abraham continues the story. He bore two children, Isaac and Ishmael, and the spiritual blessing was handed over to Isaac. And Isaac had also two children, Esau and Jacob, and the spiritual blessing has been handed over to Jacob. And by the time that Jacob has become adult and he needed a wife for himself, Isaac told him to go to the land of their forefathers in Paran, somewhere there in river Euphrates. It's about 670 kilometers away from Canaan, where Isaac was living. No, so along the way in the area called Bethel, Jacob became so tired and he slept during the night. And during his sleep, he actually dreamt a ladder which is reaching from earth to heaven, and in that ladder so many angels are going to and fro. So therefore, he developed a notion that God is really for him, and God is really had a plan based on his promises unto him. So when he woke up, he said, if you are going to make my journey successful and you give me everything that I need, like my food and my shelter, I shall give you a tenth of everything that I received from you. And that has become a vow from Jacob. And of course, Jacob's story continues. He went to Paran Aram and met Rachel and Leah over there. They became their wives, and he stayed there for 7 years. No, not only 7 but 14 years, 7 each, because he was sort of tricked by the father of these two ladies. And after 14 years with his children, he came back to Canaan, where his father was living, because that is the place where God has promised that he is going to give them to their descendants, as many as the stars in heaven. Now, along the way, there's a river called Jabbok, and he met that angel. And Jacob has got that attitude that if he meets a holy person, he cannot allow him to get away without blessing him, just like Abraham did with Melchizedek. So Jacob asked the angel, wrestled with the angel and asked him to bless him, and he didn't really release him. And that's why the angel considered it as he wrestled with him, with God, and yet prevailed. And because of that, his name was changed to Israel. So remember that Jacob has a vow for the 10th. And when he changed his name into Israel, the vow of 10% has been actually a vow for Israel for the generations that followed. So this is how it started there in Genesis chapter 28. Now, the story goes, Jacob became the patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. At one point in time, when he became so old, Canaan has experienced deep problems with regards to drought, and they're gonna all die if there's no solution. That's why God has provided a solution through his child, through one of his second to the last son. His name is Joseph. Joseph became the second most important person in Egypt, second to Pharaoh only. And the family of Jacob was actually migrated to Egypt, and there they lived for 400 years until the time that the Pharaoh who was actually ruling the land, the empire, did not recognize the goodness of the family of Jacob anymore. In fact, he was threatened because the family of Jacob, starting from 12 people, has become almost 1 million who is living in Goshen. No? And the Pharaoh there, the reigning Pharaoh, was threatened. He said, these people are so numerous, if they're going to be attacking us, our empire will be lost. So therefore, we put burden in their shoulders. We make them slaves. They're going to build our monuments, our tombs, our pyramids. And the cry of this people Israel when they are slaves, because of the slave drivers, was heard by God in heaven. And of course, God could not contend that, because basically he has a promise for the patriarchs. That's why he raised for himself a man called Moses, drawn from the water, in order for Moses to be their deliverer. And so Moses succeeded after the story, and they crossed, all of them, 1 million of Israelites, they crossed the Red Sea. And then the other side, basically, they have encamped near the Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. It's a place called the wilderness of Sin. And but before that, basically before they crossed the Red Sea, the Egyptians was changed in their hearts by God. The Egyptians had given them so much treasures that each and every person who crossed the sea has become very wealthy. They have all the silver and gold that they want. No, so during the time in the desert for 40 years for roaming around, Moses has actually instituted and formalized the principle of tenth. No. In the book of Leviticus, in the book of Numbers, and in the book of Deuteronomy. In fact, in the book of Leviticus 27:30 to 33, Moses said that everything from the land people should tithes and give it to the priests, because the 11 tribes has got a portion for them to be divided. But the Levites, the tribe of Levi, has got no portion. The portion of Levi, God said, is himself. He said, I am your portion. I am your inheritance. All you have to do is to serve me. So the Levites receive all the tithes from the Israelites, and at the same time the Levites will also apportion 10% from all his collection, and this 10% is used for the temple service. So this is when the tenth or the tithes has been formalized, no? And in fact, there are other forms of agricultural products. Why agricultural products? Because this is only when God can actually show to the people that no man has an ability to grow a plant. No man has an ability to sustain life of animals. But each and every person who has got a trade for himself, like he is a carpenter or a blacksmith or whatever office, he could do it by dependence on his skills. But with regards to the botanical and other things that grows, only God can grow. In Mark chapter 4 verse 26, there's a principle that Jesus spoke to us. He said, a kingdom of God is like a man who goes out in the field and spread his seeds, and after that he goes home and he does his usual chores. The seeds, without him knowing, will grow and become seedlings and become plants, and in due time it produces its yield. So man has got nothing to do with it at all. The one who planted it go home and did his own church. Only God. And this is directly proportionate to the obedience of the people of Israel during the time. And according to Deuteronomy 11 verse 13 to 15, if you obey and serve God well, it says there, he will give you the rain for your crops, and he's gonna give grass for the livestock to live. You see, it is directly proportionate to the obedience of the people of Israel during the time. It's different. Some people may argue, well, in the United States they are all having this GMO, mass production of GMO, because the GMO is not eaten by insects, so it is easy for them to actually harvest that. That exactly is the point. GMO is so dangerous that basically even the insects won't eat. So how much more for human beings? So it is genetically modified food, which is not organic. Only God can grow the organic food, no? Now, so that is the thing. That's why God has chosen the plants and the herbs and the grains and the animals to be to be tenth. In fact, he was telling the people of Israel in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 22 to 29, before they cross to the land of promise, he said, don't bring your tithes don't bring your tithes because it's so burdenful for you. I mean, you could not expect a person will carry a goat or a lamb or a sheep on his shoulders while crossing the Jordan River. But what you do is you sell it and exchange it with silver or gold or whatever. But when you reach to the place where I'm appointed you to go, buy again. Why buy again? So you don't need this money. All you need is food, in order for you to be able to eat together with the priests and together with the poor people and foreigners over that land, and that when you are all filled, you're filled with joy as well, and come back to me in worship. That's what he said. He said in Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 22 and 29. See, the purpose of tithes basically is for people to be satisfied and get back to God in praises and giving him thanksgiving. Not in the form of anything, not in the form of money, silver or gold, but in a form of agricultural products whereby God can only grow. Now, going back to the tithes has started to become politicized during the time of the judges. The last judge of Israel was Samuel. During his time, the people of Israel has already have that indication that they don't like God to be their king. God was sad about that news, but they said, give it to them because they're hard-headed anyway. But take note of this, warn them, when they have a human king, that king is going to take tenths from everything from them. And their boys is going to be soldiers, and in the service of the king, and their women are going to be the maids in the palace of the king. And everything, a tenth from their products shall be collected by the king. So it has been burdensome for them, because on top of them giving to the temple or to the worship service, tenth, they also give to the government as a taxation form. Is Israelites taxation form, 10%, no? So they are burdened, and God said, if you're burdened and you call back to me, I'm not going to answer you, because you are a hard-headed kind of people, no? And it has been like that until finally the time of Malachi arrived. It has been highlighted there that people almost stopped giving, and that's why you are robbing from me, book of Malachi says. And he's trying to test people's heart. But you know, it's very difficult for people, because instead of following God, they follow the king, because the king has got a sword. If they don't follow the king, they're gonna be cut off to pieces, right? Now, the burden of Israel continues. You know, between Malachi and book of Matthew is 400 years. During the time, there are a lot of problems in Israel, and this includes also their faithfulness to God with tithes. You know, Antiochus Epiphanes attacked Jerusalem in 127 BC, and they have conducted abomination to desolation in the temple of God. They put the statue of Zeus there, and they slaughter a pig, a great insult. And that's why the family of Maccabees revolted against him. And of course, he was defeated. Later on, the Roman Empire came into picture in the time of Jesus. And the Roman Empire also collected taxes, really burden upon burden upon burden. But you see, if you ask, did Jesus taught about tithes? And my direct answer is to you, no. Even though he talked about tithes in the book of Luke, chapter 11, I think in verse 23 or 24, 11:42, he actually addresses it to the Pharisees, who in the first place are the lineage of the Levites. They are priests. Jesus knew that they are supposed to be giving tithes, and they are very serious about that. And he said, you are very good in giving your tenth of your mints and your herbs and everything else, but you are not concerned about an even more excellent priority of God, which is mercy and love to the poor and to other people. So you see, he's not teaching there, but he's telling the people who are already giving tithes that these are not more important than what God is concerned about, which is mercy and love, no? Now, Jesus was even more concerned about paying the government. In the book of Matthew chapter 17, verse 27, it says, in order for us not to upset the government, he said, for the tax collectors, Peter, you go to the river and throw your line, and the first fish that you catch, open its mouth, you'll find 4 drachmas there, 2 for me and 2 for you, and go to the tax collector and pay them, in order for us not to defy them or to upset them, or you see, he's more than that. And if you believe that everything in the Bible is actually spoken by God through Jesus Christ and his prophets, in the book of Romans, in the mouth or in the writings of Paul, Romans chapter 13, is the same thing. It's the same principle. It says, if there's no government that is existing on the face of the earth without the approval of God, consequently, if you are going to go against government, you are actually going against God. And so if the government wants honor, give them honor. If they want respect, give them respect. If they want taxes, give them your taxes. So basically, this is about the tithes that I'm sharing with you tonight. And just to give you a summary, again, tithes is basically a tenth, which is measurable, which is measured, and which is like a compulsory. It doesn't actually give it freely from the heart, because you're asking for compulsory. Now, tithes is in the form of agricultural products, because this is where God can prove to the people, but depending on your obedience to me, I can make this thing grow. All other thing which you do is actually based on your skills. You could produce, you know, if you're a salaried person, if you're a carpenter, you could produce that, but only by these products that I could produce. And number 3, it has become at one point of time a taxation system of Israel. And number 4 is that it is applicable for Israelites, because it has become like a vow for Israel or Jacob. Other than this, being Christians in the New Testament era, we have something else better than this. So the statement tithes and offerings, the reason that you put and there, because they are not or. So they are actually separate. The idea is separate. We just have to understand that it's not tithes and offerings. They're separate. It is not tithes or offerings, but tithes and offerings. I pray that you have understood this and you're encouraged in this. And the next video that I have is we talk extensively about the right giving, the offering, which is actually our mandate. If you're encouraged with this particular video, put your click, like, share, and don't forget to subscribe on my channel. Thank you, and God bless you.